Hey everyone, in this video I'll show you how to make a realistic metal material with scratches and edge wear. And then at the end of this video I'll show you how to apply this material to our Game Boy we modeled in the last tutorial, and then we'll render that out and see how it looks. So without any further ado, let's just jump into this video. Okay, so I've opened up a new Blender scene, and this time we're actually going to save the default cube. Okay, so let's just jump straight over to shading, and first of all I'll just change some settings. So I'll make the render engine cycles. It's a lot more realistic, but it isn't as fast, so you can choose between Eevee and cycles. But I'm going to stick with cycles, and then I'm going to make the device GPU compute so it renders with my GPU. And then I'm also going to go down to color management and make the look, let's go medium high contrast. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to download a nice metal material. My favorite place to find high quality realistic materials is ambientcg.com. Okay, so I'll have a link in the description that will take you to ambientcg.com, and then we're just going to go up to materials. And then first off we want metal, so I'm going to type in metal. And I think this is the one I used. It's a nice scratchy old sort of metal. And I'm going to download, let's go 4K. The 4K version is pretty big, but it'll be perfect for nice close-up renders. And then the second one I'm going to look up is wood. And I think I went with this nice dark wood. But you can pick whatever wood and whatever materials you like, okay? I'll download the 4K again, and that is downloading up here. Okay, so those have finished downloading. I'll just close out of that and that one. Then I'll just go to downloads, and you can see we have our wood and metal textures. So I'm just going to cut those by pressing Ctrl X on Windows. That would be Command X on Mac. And then I'll paste those in my assets folder. And these folders are zipped, so first of all we want to unzip that. So you can right click on those folders and click extract all, or if you have 7-zip you can use that. Okay, so those are unzipped. I can delete those zipped ones. And now we have our two 4K materials. And one more thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to save this blend file, and I'll just call that realisticmetal.blend, and then we can save it. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom in on our cube here, and I'm going to go back to our file explorer, and I'll just go into the metal folder. And what we want is we want the roughness, the metalness, and the color. So I'll select all of those and just drag and drop those into Blender. Okay, so we want to plug the color into the base color of the principled BSDF. And you can see we have some nice scratches. And then I'll plug the roughness into the principled BSDF's roughness socket. And if that's a bit too rough, you can actually add a color ramp in between and just bring in the white to make it less rough. Now I need to add the metallic in, which is called metalness. So I'll just bring that over here, and I'll plug that into the metallic. Okay, something like this looks pretty good. I'm also just going to drag and drop the displacement in, and then we can just plug the color into the material output, and this will show us the black and white. And you can see the scratches are the black, which is good. We want the scratches to be like kind of displaced in a bit. So I'll add a bump node, and I'll plug the color of the displacement into the height of the bump, and plug the bump into the normal of the principled BSDF. Okay, so that adds a lot more roughness, but it's probably way too much, so I'll make it to something like 0.1. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Maybe I'll make it 0.05. Yeah, that looks really nice. Okay. Yeah, now I'm just going to organize these nodes a little bit more. And I'll turn on the snap tool. And then I'll just position this in a neater way. Okay, something like this is fine. So for the edge wear, I'm going to first add a ambient occlusion node. Now if I press Ctrl Shift to view this, you can see it's totally white. So we want to enable inside and only local. Now you can see we kind of have a tiny gradient. To make this a bit more visible, I'm going to add a color ramp, and put that in between. And then we can just bring the white down and the black in. So probably something like this should be good. We can adjust this later depending on how it looks. Then I want to add a mix shader node, and I'll plug that in to the principled BSDF, and I'll plug the color ramp into the factor. Now I'm going to duplicate this principled BSDF, and I'll just leave it white, and I'll plug that into the top socket. Now we can plug this into the surface of the material output, and you can see we do have a masking effect. Wherever the black is, the scratched metal material is showing. But at the moment, you can see it's very intense, so we can just crank this down a little bit. And probably something like this looks pretty good. You can keep adjusting this till you have something you like. So now the edges are nice and shiny and white. I'll actually make it fully metallic and very rough, so it looks like the edges have been worn, and I'll make it fully white. Now we can adjust the color ramp a bit more, and something like that looks pretty good. Okay, we can also add a noise texture, and we can duplicate this color ramp and press delete to reset it. Then I'll plug the factor into the factor and adjust these a little bit. And then I'll press Control Shift and click on that, and you can see we are viewing it. And probably something like this should be fine. I'll make the scale, let's go 8, the detail all the way up. And then we want to mix these two nodes together. So what I'll do is I'll add a mix color node. Put that in there. I'll make the top one the factor, and I'll make the second color ramp the A, and then I'll make the color black. Now if we view this, you can see the edges are black, and we've also got black spots on our cube. Now we can plug this mix color into the mix shaders factor. Now let's have a look at that. You can see it's basically all shiny. So we need to adjust some of the color ramps properties. So probably something like this, where we just have little patches of like worn out bits, looks pretty good. So maybe something like this looks pretty nice. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Okay, so now if we model this, so I'll just go into edit mode, insert, and extrude some faces. And then I press U. And then I press U, unwrap, and Smart UV project. You can see this is a nice responsive material. Okay, so one more thing I want to do is I want to add some grunge in these like crevices. Get an ambient occlusion node. Now if we view this node just by itself, you can see in the cracks and the crevices it's a bit darker. So it might be a bit hard to see on YouTube's compression, so I'll add a color ramp in there to make this more dramatic. And you can see in all the crevices we have a dark black color. Okay, so now we have this. I'm going to add a principled BSDF. I'll make this color a dark brown, a very dark brown. I'll put it over here. And then we want to add another mix shader node, and I'll put that in there. Then I'll make this the factor again, and plug this brown principled BSDF into the bottom. And that's actually the wrong way, so if we grab this out again and hold Control Alt, we can actually swap those around. Now it's pretty hard to see, but if I make this a bit brighter, you can see what it's doing here. So in the crevices, it's adding some nice, like, dirt grunge. Okay, so I think that's looking pretty good for the moment. And I'll just make this darker again. Yeah, so something like that looks pretty good. You can also turn the roughness all the way up so it's not reflective. Okay, that looks like a nice grungy bit of metal. Now let's save this and add this to our Game Boy. So I'm going to open our Game Boy from the last tutorial and go over to shading and go to rendered view. Then The materials I showed you how to make in this tutorial were very basic, so let's update this to the new material. So to update this, I'm going to go to File, Append, and we're just going to locate that blend file we were just in. Once you found it, you'll double click it, go down to Material, and we'll select that material. Then we can click Append. Now if we have a look, you can see we do have our grungy material, so I'll add that, and that actually looks really good. It looks so much more realistic. And at the moment you can see I just made it a blue. It's not actually doing that much. So we need to adjust the color ramp a little bit. So I'll view the mix color and I'll just adjust the color ramp. And then we can view that again. So that's way too much. Clamp this down. And just need to find something that you like. So something like this is probably fine. And I'll make this white again. And you can make this any color you want. You can actually just leave it white if you want to. But I think I'm just going to go for the metallic like this. Yeah, that looks really good. And you can see the grunge is working on the bottom. If we change the color, you can see that is actually affecting it. Okay, so now let's go into camera view, and if we press Shift and tilde key, we can control this like a game with the WASD keys. And I'll just find a position I like, a nice close-up. Probably something like this. Looks really nice. And then we need to add the wood material to the floor. So I'll make a new material and call this wood floor. Find the principal would be SDF, and let's go back to our file explorer and go to the wood material. I'll drag in the color and the displacement, and I'll plug the color into the color, and we can add a bump node and plug the displacement into the height and plug the bump into the normal. Now it's super bumpy, so let's make it 0.1. Let's add a mapping node and a texture coordinate, and let's do object and plug that into both of them. Now we can scale this down or up to find a position you like. Yeah, 1 just looks fine. And one thing you can see, this world HDRI looks way better than our actual render lighting. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete all those lights. So select those lights, delete them. Then I'm going to turn that back on. I actually like this default HDRI a lot. So we can actually get this out of Blender itself. So if you click the Windows button and then type in Blender, you can find Blender, and then we can open the file location and then right click on that and open file location again. And then we can go into the 4.3 folder, data files, studio lights, world, and then the one I like is, where is it? Forest. So I'll copy that and paste it in our assets folder. Now if we go to the world icon over here, click this yellow button here and choose environment texture, go into assets and select forest.exr. Then I'll click open, and now if we turn off scene lights and scene worlds, it's going to look exactly the same. Now you can also swap between a few of these and pick one that you really like, or this one, but I think I'm going to stick with the forest. So now all we have to do is click F12 or render and render image. Now it will render our new realistic material. And remember, you can use this material for whatever objects you want. Hope this tutorial helped you and you learned something from it. And if you like this sort of content, please subscribe. There's a lot of more cool videos to come this year, and I'll see you in the next one.